When Tesla launched the CyberTruck, they also released a limited edition beer, the CyberBeer, sold with a CyberStein. 2 bottles of this beer will set you back a ridiculous $150. Now, while this recipe isn't published anywhere, I've performed some internet sleuthing and have brewed my very own CyberBeer based on the specifications I found online, and I'm going to show you how you can brew one too. This episode is sponsored by Atlantic Brew Supply. More on them in a bit. I have to admit, as a Tesla owner myself, I was quite curious about a Tesla beer. Called the CyberBeer, the beer is packaged in 2 black bottles with ceramic beer steins that have all the same weird edges and lines as the CyberTruck. But $150 for 2 330 milliliter servings of beer? No thanks. So I wanted to brew one myself, and the Tesla website has some clues as to the specs of the beer. So it's listed as a Helles lager at 7% ABV. It uses Saaz and Hallertau Mittelfrüh for the hop additions, and the beer has notes of herb and spice, and interestingly for the style, notable aromas of tea and citrus. Now, tea is not a characteristic I'd expect from those noble hops, so that did initially stump me. Tesla also note the beer is brewed by Buzzrock Brewing in California. A thread on Reddit pointed to an entry for a Buzzrock brew listed on Untappd, simply called beer. And while that entry didn't have a whole bunch of information, I did now have an IBU number of 22 to shoot for. So I set the tea puzzle aside for the moment and got down to the business of brewing a beer. In Brewfather, I put together a malt bill for a Helles lager consisting of 92% modern Pilsner malt from Epiphany Craft Malt, 6% of Munich malt for a hint of biscuit, and a touch of melanoidin for body. To get to the required 7% ABV, I was shooting for an original gravity of 1.072. While I measured out and crushed the grains, I heated up the reverse osmosis water that I collected earlier and added some water salts, most notably calcium chloride, to accentuate the maltiness of the beer. Then, just before going to bed, I added the grains into the heated water and gave them a stir, where they would sit for an overnight mash. And as for mash temperature, I'm going to maintain the mash at 152 Fahrenheit, 67 Celsius overnight. See you in the morning. Now, the mash rest really only needed 30 to 60 minutes, but an overnight mash is a handy way to split a brew day. And next morning, I awoke to see the mash was still holding steady at 152 Fahrenheit. I removed the grains and brought to a boil and added my hop additions. Now, as per the Tesla website, I went with Hallertau Mittelfrüh and Saaz. During the 30-minute boil, I added 20 grams of Hallertau Mittelfrüh as my bittering addition. With 10 minutes left in the boil, I added 28 grams of Saaz, and then at the end of the boil, I kept the wort at around 170 Fahrenheit and performed a whirlpool with a further 20 grams of Saaz. All that, according to Brewfather, should give me an IBU of 22, just like the listing in Untappd. I chilled the wort using my counterflow chiller and was pleased to see that I hit my original gravity target exactly 1.072. Finally, I transferred the beer into my fermenter, added my yeast, that was L17 Harvest from Imperial Yeast, and maintained a fermentation temperature of 60 Fahrenheit or 16 C. Now, remember that the tasting notes for this beer called for notes of herb and spice. Well, my 30-minute Hallertau hop addition should take care of some of that. And then as for notable aromas of tea and citrus, well, the late Saaz addition and the whirlpool should bring a touch of citrus to proceedings, but neither of those hops are known for imparting tea aromas, so I had to think outside the box. Now I've got a plan as how to get some tea and a touch of citrus into this thing. Earl Grey black tea with citrus. Now I know what you're thinking. If I brew up a cup of this tea and pour it in my lager, it's going to be quite astringent, probably not very desirable, but I think I've got a plan to work around that. So this is a cold brew coffee maker. The idea is you put some coffee beans in, you steep it overnight in that cold water, and the result is a much smoother coffee when you do that compared to brewing with hot water. And something similar is done for tea. It's called cold steeping with tea. So I'm going to try cold steeping some of this tea and then pouring it into my beer. All right, so I've got about 1 litre of cold filtered water here. And this stainless steel mesh is what I'll be putting into this vessel here to steep the tea. Now, in terms of how much tea to add, what I've seen is a ratio of 1 to 50, meaning for every 1 part tea, you want 50 parts water. I have 1,000 milliliters of water, so I need 20 grams of tea. Wow, just look at the color of this tea. Black tea for sure. Okay, so the tea comes up to about here. All right, in it goes. I need to mix the tea in. Star then on my spoon. Just want to make sure it is all fully submerged. I'm going to pop this in the fridge, about 6 hours. Okay, it's time for tea. Pretty attractive color there, this looks nice. So just remove the filter. Looks very clear. Let's give it a try. Okay, so color-wise, it's not too dark. A little darker than my lager will be, but not hugely so. Yeah, and I'm getting, even from this small pour, unmistakable aromas of tea and citrus. Actually, that's quite surprising how such a small amount is leading to so many strong aromas. Let's give it a try. Quite prominent citrus, a little bit astringent, but not very. So I think the cold steeping has definitely reduced the astringency. Yeah, but I feel like a little goes a long way with this. Now, one of these glasses here, these Brülosophy glasses, that holds about 130 milliliters of fluid. So I think I'm just gonna basically use this as my measurement. That's about 100 milliliters. This is all I'm going to add to the beer because I do just want a touch of the tea aroma and citrus. I don't want it to actually taste like a cup of tea. As for when to add it in, well, the beer has been fermenting for about 4 days now. It seems to be coming to an end. So just like when I would add dry hops just near the end of fermentation, that's what I'm going to do with this. So this is going in right now. Now, before we get to tasting this beer, a quick word on today's sponsor, Atlantic Brew Supply. I've been an Atlantic Brew Supply customer from as soon as I started brewing. These guys are legit. I've brewed literally hundreds of beers with ingredients from ABS, and they never disappoint. Atlantic Brew Supply offer a huge supply of beer ingredients and equipment, and you can order online at atlanticbrewsupply.com. Oh, and if you're ever in the Raleigh, North Carolina area, you owe it to yourself to stop by the store and check out their selection or participate in one of the many in-store events. Oh yeah, and a quick plug for their excellent Fermentality podcast, especially their October episode. Okay, so back to my CyberBeer, where after about 4 weeks, I cold crashed, pressure transferred into a keg, force carbonated, and finally served the beer to fellow Tesla owner Joe. So I've got fellow Tesla owner Joe. We've got our Teslas behind us, like a couple of fanboys. I've got a, why would it be?
Final 3 performance.
Yeah, are you going to be placing an order for CyberTruck?
No, I think I'm good on the Teslas these days.
Yeah, one's enough.
Yeah.
I think so too. So, let's try this CyberBeer, see what you think.
All right.
Reasonably clear, nice golden color. All right, so this is not the $150 CyberBeer because that's too cheap to buy that. And this is not served in the right glass. But let's see what you think of it.
All right. Cheers.
Cheers.
It kind of reminds me of, dare I say, Bud Light.
Yeah, right. Yeah, light lager sort of thing. Definitely a bit boozier than that.
Indeed.
I don't get any tea on the aroma, but I think there's a little bit of astringency to the taste. There is a little bit kind of tea-like.
Maybe kind of the aftertaste.
The aftertaste, exactly. That's what I think.
It goes down quite nicely.
It's very easy drinking.
It is. Could be a little bit of Blue Moon.
Right. So the Blue Moon would be citrus, and that is the other aspect that it was going for. So it's saying Notes of tea and citrus were kind of the big things. So I think, Joe, the question is, if you received 2 small bottles of this beer and you spent $150 on it, would you feel like you had a good deal?
I'm not sure I would.
All right, cheers.
Cheers.